My personal story. I decided on going the non-certified route as an education major because, as time had led me to understand, my future rests in the Arizona Air National Guard. This fall, I will be going to basic training and starting my career shortly after. I have been asked, as I'd be graduating at the same time either way, why I took the non-certified route instead of simply finishing up college with a certification. Well, the answer might initially sound ironic, but I took this route because I still see myself being a teacher down the road. How much further down the road I see this happening is not certain to me, but I have not lost my passion for education and place great value in all I have been taught throughout my college experience regarding this field. Taking the certified route would consist of student teaching for an entire semester. Most individuals that begin their student teaching are expecting to become a teacher themselves the following semester and occupy themselves with such a position. It must be noted that student teaching is not at all easy. You commit yourself to learning the ways of your mentor teacher and must be fully present and attentive each step of the way. With my heart certain of the path God is leading me, student teaching now would have been comparable to enlisting in the military and going off to basic training with the intent of becoming a teacher once returned. If I do become a teacher in the future, I look forward to student teaching at the right season in my life. The lessons I have learned about the field of education will never leave me, and regardless of whatever field I enter, see how I can apply the knowledge I have gained of being a mentor to anything I do in my life. As for now, though, God has called me to a career that, for generations, my family has served in, and I am proud to keep the legacy of. My gift of leading by example will allow me to enter the National Guard as an officer and successfully lead my teams to success, fulfilling the duties of such a position. For my literature analysis, I initially aimed to base my work on one aspect or another of the military. I considered the topic of enlistment and the efficacy of how soldiers are being recruited today. However, there were obstacles in the way with finding an internship with the military. It is not necessarily standard procedure to technically allow civilians a job position on a military base. The military was the path I was sure to be taking, though, so I was uncertain of how I was going to surpass this roadblock. I started back at square one and considered my current state as a student. With 4 years worth of instruction on secondary education under my belt, I began to consider how I might still focus my capstone on the field I have spent diving into for this significant chapter of my life. Times are changing and are temporarily looking very different in the field of education. Online instruction was prominent throughout the middle of the pandemic. Students and educators alike struggled with the adjustment. As a student myself that, due to circumstances at home and with the blessing from Arizona Christian University, have been participating virtually in synchronodal classrooms. I figured a deeper look at the current practices held within synchronodal classroom settings would be beneficial not only to me as a student, but a potential future educator that is looking at increased technological additions to classrooms throughout the world. Throughout my research, I was able to split up my findings into 5 separate categories of different prominence: design, instruction, technological aspects, the social climate, and engagement of such a particular classroom setting. Finding that there is far less research on how an educator should shift their practices when transferring from an entirely in-person class to such a hybrid experience such as a synchronodal classroom, I decided to focus my research on how educators may improve the experience for students online in such a class. Finding an internship that met my requirements as an online synchronodal student myself was challenging. While high schools themselves were experiencing their own challenges while navigating through such uncertain times, many could not bring me in, or once I transitioned to an online student, conduct a virtual internship with me. My girlfriend, though, had just entered into her second semester as a teacher at a middle school named Desert Trails in Phoenix. The previous semester, her district had been conducting class entirely online. However, with all convenience, her school began teaching in person again, with roughly half of the student body still online and at home. With what opportunity I was given, I was able to share different practices with Miss King and observe her feedback, gaining knowledge of which activities and practices did and did not so much benefit a synchromodal learning environment. I learned that teaching such a unique classroom style can be widely different from teaching a typical in-person class. Overall, the failures of such a classroom often result from a teacher maintaining the practices held from in-person classes while instructing both online and in-person students simultaneously. When an emphasis is given to acknowledge and involve the online students of such a classroom, the efficacy of that setting increases for students of both mediums. Taking a closer look at this profession through my internship, I have learned how much goes into teaching and being a teacher. While focusing on maintaining an inclusive environment for her online students, Ms. King taught me that a good teacher makes sure not a single student is left behind, no matter if they're attending in person or an alternative platform. For my project, I am gathering a compilation of lesson plans that, through Ms. King's experience, have satisfied the needs of a synchromodal classroom. I will also include lesson plans that did not work out. When figuring anything, it is important to understand both the pros and cons so that you know when you may be engaging in inefficient practices. The lesson plans consist of both my own personally made lesson plans from online that are recommended and/or involve research-based techniques to include online students, as well as lesson plans of and shared by Ms. King that she made for her synchromodal classroom. All will have been practiced in her classroom and with the feedback she shares. For each lesson plan shared in my project, I will give a description of why they do or do not satisfy the needs of a synchromodal classroom setting, and how they might impact both the in-person and virtual students at hand. At this point in the semester, I have not yet presented my project. The due date for the presentation of my project is later to that of this academic symposium. When I do present the summation of my project to Ms. King, though, I will gather all lesson plans from my project and compile them in a digital portfolio of sorts. I will present the project to her and share the conclusions I had drawn from researching for the project and her own anecdote. Although I have not presented yet, I have received other productive feedback from Ms. King thus far. Her illustration of successes and failures that occur with that advice and strategy I offer her helps me narrow down the best practices for a synchromodal classroom as I move forward with choosing what lesson plans I will present and ultimately give to her. My mission statement. I aim to benefit those around me, whether they be my superior or inferior, through displaying my leadership skills and relentlessly considering not only my side of whatever situation there may be, but their own perspective when facing an issue. In this figure, which is labeled Comparison between Face-to-Face and Online Students' Mean Virtual Presence Ratings, we see that a common struggle with virtual attendees is the lack of inclusion they perceive. Here is an example from a previous lesson plan that I revised for Ms. King to accommodate for her synchromodal classroom setting. In the highlighted areas, we see that there are alternative ways that resources and aspects of this certain activity are displayed for the class. There is no doubt that virtual students and in-person students experience class differently, but this is not a problem we consider the needs of both platforms. When we do, all students of such a classroom setting are included. Participation levels, therefore, will increase, and you will have done your job as an educator to reach all students of a class.